Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and it won't be news to most of you to hear that Canadian real estate prices have been on the rise since the start of the pandemic. Now, it's pretty difficult to really have a good idea of why the market's moving in the way that it is and when it's going to make those moves, but a lot of people are pointing to the lower interest rates that we've been seeing as the reason for this increase. But there's one small piece in this house of cards that more and more people are saying, hey, depending on the way that this actually shakes out, we could see the whole thing come tumbling down. And that last piece of the puzzle is mortgage deferrals. You might remember this from back at the beginning of the pandemic when there was a lot of talk about it. Essentially, the main banks and other people who lend on these houses said, hey, you know what, you can pause on your mortgage payments because we know this is a rough time for everybody. And this was back in March. These payments weren't forgiven, they were just sort of tacked on to the end of the loan to be paid later. But either way, they were a huge help for Canadian homeowners who were in a pinch. But now, some of these mortgage deferral programs are starting to end, and it could result in some cracks in the Canadian real estate market. Now, I'm a real estate agent in the Greater Toronto area, so it's part of my job to stay as up to date as possible with all of the factors that could affect the market. So in today's video, we're going to do a deep dive on this mortgage deferral program ending, and we're going to take a closer look at the numbers to try to figure out just how big of an effect this could have on the Canadian market. No matter if you're currently a homeowner or you invest in real estate, or you're somebody who's looking to buy their first place someday, real estate remains a huge way that Canadians build their wealth, and after all, that's what this channel is all about. The goal is to bring information like this to Canadians as quickly as possible so that they can set themselves up to live a more financially stable future. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, make sure to hit all those buttons down there, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm bringing updates like this all the time. But with all of that said, let's dive into this information. If you remember back to when mortgage deferrals were talked about heavily in the news, you'll know that most of these deferrals from the big bank were to be 6 months long. So if you're somebody who applied for the mortgage deferral program back in mid-March, that would have had you ending your deferral program sometime around mid-September. Back in April, a lot of people thought that when this program ended, people would start falling behind on their mortgages and be pressured into selling their properties, increasing the supply of houses and decreasing the prices that they're going for. But at first glance, that doesn't seem to be what's happening right now, especially if you're taking a look at the news. You're hearing headlines of housing prices have increased dramatically over the course of the pandemic, even more than before, which doesn't make a lot of sense to people. But before we can understand why or why not things are happening right now, we need to get a better idea of how many people were on this mortgage deferral program and how many people have since gone off of it. Take a look at this super simple chart from betterdwelling.com. Here on the side, it shows you the percentage of total mortgages that are in this deferral program in any given month since the start of the pandemic. And this data is taken from 8 of the largest mortgage holding banks in Canada. Now, in March, we saw 10% of all mortgages go into this deferral program, and it remained at 10% for April. Then we saw an increase with a maximum peak point there at 15% of all mortgages having some sort of deferral program. Many people think that we saw this peak here in June because this is when most people were really feeling the impacts of maybe having less work or being laid off for a time, and they were thinking, hey, you know what, we should probably apply to this mortgage deferral program so we can make sure not to lose our house. Then we saw a steady decline all the way until the most recent data that we have, which is September, and that dropped all the way down to 6% of all total mortgages are still under this deferral program as of September. I can't talk. Over the course of this steady decline downwards at the end of this chart here, that's when we saw a lot of people going back to work and Canada's unemployment numbers going down. So many of the people who were in this program were no longer in the program because they were able to go back to work and make a little bit of money. In total, upwards of 795,000 households were on this mortgage deferral program. But now, just under 500,000 of those mortgages are off of the program, and this could be for one of two reasons. Either they canceled the program and started making their regular payments again, or it's now September and they've been forced to stop it because they signed up in March and it's been the full 6 months for them. But on the other hand, just under 300,000 people are still on this mortgage deferral program, and that's likely because they signed up for the program later. You'll remember that you could sign up for this program all the way until September, like this most recent September. So if you signed up in September, you have a maximum of 6 months on this deferral program, which could take us into the area of March 2021, that the last people who signed up would be forced to get off of the program. But what does this all mean? We know that around 500,000 people are off of the program, but we don't know what mix of those people just chose to be off of the program and now they're able to make the payments, or were they forced off of this program and now they're struggling to make the payments. That's where the difference lies, and that's going to be the big indicator of whether or not we're going to see any major effect on the housing market. So it seems like we won't know the true effects of all the people being forced off of this program for another couple of months at least, and that's for a couple of different reasons. The first reason we already talked about a little bit. People were able to apply for this deferral program for a period of 6 months, starting any time between March and September. So the people who signed up in April still haven't had their payments end. So as we see more and more people forced off of the program, we'll see a greater effect. And the second reason is that we won't really see what this portion of the mix is of people who've been pushed off of the program, whether they're making their payments or not making the payments, right? We have to wait to see the mortgage arrears data. And that's data that shows us how many people aren't paying their mortgage and how many banks and major banks in Canada are taking action against them because of this fact that they're not making their mortgage payments. In general, banks don't want to go through this whole foreclosure process. It's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of legal paperwork that they have to do to go through the entire process. They'd far rather you stay true to your mortgage and make those payments and make them a little bit of money. So they're going to exhaust all options before going into this foreclosure process. Because of that, the real pressure that a lot of homeowners would feel in that foreclosure process has been delayed a few months because banks want to exhaust other options before going down that road. And that's going to delay the whole effect on the market even longer after their deferral ends. That means if you applied for your mortgage deferral in September, you'd be ending sometime around March 2021, and then April and May, and that's 2 months after your mortgage deferral would end, and that's when we might start to see some of the data of the people who applied for their mortgage deferral most recently. And who knows what the world's going to look like at that point in time, right? Things have been moving so quickly, and we never know how the employment numbers are going to improve and how many people are going to be able to get a job to keep true to their mortgage in that time. But in summary, it seems like it's just a little bit too soon to know for sure whether or not this piece of the puzzle will pull that card out from that house of cards and send it all tumbling down. With insurance rates as low as they are, and with the immigration targets that the Canadian government has put into place, it's seeming more and more likely that we'll see house prices increase before we see any sort of decline. So if you're somebody who's been waiting on this housing crash to get into the market, you could be waiting a little while longer. But I want to know what you have to say about all of this. How do you think this mortgage deferral program ending is going to affect the market? Do you think that there's a dramatic dip in our future? Or do you think that with all of these other factors we've talked about, we're going to see Canadian home prices keep on rising in most of the major markets? Crash or no crash? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you can think of somebody that you care about or love that could benefit from having a little bit of a better understanding on where the market's going, make sure to hit that share button and send this video their way. And of course, if you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I'm coming out with updates like this all the time with the overall goal of bringing information to Canadians as quickly and accurately as possible so that they can set themselves up to live a more wealthy and financially stable future. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this information has given you a better understanding on where things are at in the Canadian housing market, and I'll see you next time.